Every computer on the internet has been assigned a unique IP address. So when you want to connect to one of those computers, how do you enter that address? Well, you could type out the IP address by hand, but that's pretty complicated. IP addresses are hard to remember and hard to type out correctly, and they may change from time to time. Instead, the internet uses something called a domain name as a third sort of unique identifier that's human-friendly. A domain name is a short, memorable phrase without any spaces. It starts with a unique name for the organization, like My Favorite Spot, and ends with a dot and a short extension like .com or .org. So a domain name for a bank might be firstnationalbank.com, or a car repair shop might use mrfixit.com. The agencies that are responsible for the internet keep a list of all registered domain names. Each time a person wants to create a new domain name, they need to contact these agencies to make sure the name is unique before they can add it to the internet registry. And this process typically costs a small annual fee. Once you've registered a domain name, you can go ahead and set up one or more servers for that domain. Your main domain may just refer to your main server. However, you can use different prefixes to identify different servers. For example, you could use the mail prefix to describe a mail server on your domain, or you could use an FTP prefix to describe an FTP server, or you have a web server that'll typically have the familiar www prefix. Now don't forget that servers on the internet are just individual programs that are running on a host computer. You may just have one server program, or you may have several programs all running on the same host. Given a domain name, how do you then get the IP address? Well, that's where the domain name server, or the DNS, comes in handy. The DNS is basically a giant database that contains lists of domain names and the matching IP addresses. Anytime you want to go to www.mydomain.com, for example, you'd ask your local DNS server to give you the IP address. This is called a forward lookup. You can also do a reverse lookup on a DNS to find out what domain name matches a given IP address. Most client software like web browsers or email clients will do DNS lookups for you automatically, so you might not even realize that it's been happening on your computer all this time. So how does your computer know where to find a DNS server? Usually this is given to your computer when it connects to a valid network. Your computer will then use this DNS to perform any lookups necessary for you as you surf the internet. By now, you've probably noticed that sometimes there are different endings on domain names. You may go to a site like www.compuscholar.com, or you may see a school site like www.uf.edu, or a government site like irs.gov. Well, why are there so many different endings? These endings are actually called top-level domains and have some different meanings. Any domain that ends in edu, for example, indicates a school server. A domain that ends in gov indicates a government site, and any domain that ends in org indicates a non-profit or non-commercial company. Your student text has a list of the many different common top-level domains. You know how to access the main page of a web server just using the domain name. But what if you want to access a specific page on the server? For that, you need to use a unique address called a Uniform Resource Locator, or a URL. A URL looks something like this. The first part of the line, http:// tells the web browser that it's going out over the internet using the HTTP protocol to get a web page. HTTP is the language that web browsers and web servers use to communicate. The second part is the domain name for the target server. The final section indicates the location and name of the file that you want to view on your computer. You can use a URL to identify web pages, images, text files, videos, and many other types of files.